ability to allow him to collect that debt.
Is there a small claims procedure that perhaps lawyers could help with and take some of the burden off the judges?
Yes, and that's one thing that we're looking at, and they're instituting that with volunteer lawyers that are serving as subordinate judicial officers and holding court, so to speak, in conciliation court and making those decisions. And then the parties, if they don't like that decision, they could always appeal to the district court then. But that's one thing that we're having to look at.
That's very important. I think part of the right to practice law is also the obligation to do pro bono work. And that's a way that the lawyers can really help the system by volunteering and sitting. And most lawyers like the idea of playing judge for a day and sitting in on some small claims things and doing it conscientiously. They come up with good decisions, can get rid of a lot of, quote, business, end quote.
But in order to do that, we had to change some of the professional rules that disallowed those that were practicing in that county or in that district from performing judicial functions in that district. And so with the big district we have covering 7 counties, you preclude a lot of attorneys within the district from serving as magistrates or subordinate judicial officers in conciliation court with that rule. So we've had to change that through the Supreme Court, and now it kind of opens it up for people to participate and to volunteer their services in that way.
And I know some of the prosecutors are part-time prosecutors that come from the cities. The city of Eagan has a firm that works as part-time prosecutors, I guess, and they jockey around different lawyers in that situation, so I assume others do also. That's got to relieve the burden to some degree, but then it throws it all back on your office because you still have the same administrative functions.
It stays the same for us, no matter if, and in fact, some of the cases that cause us a little more pain now is more and more people are coming to court and they're pro se, meaning they don't have an attorney to represent them. And so the court is trying really hard to make sure that they are given as much information as they possibly can without giving them legal advice. And that falls on the shoulders of my staff to make sure that they're helping them, giving them the proper forms, but at the same time not giving them, legal advice.
Yeah, legal advice is not within their court.
That's exactly correct.
With their job description.
And in those types of cases, and the judges can speak to this, those types of cases tend to slow the court calendar down because they're not familiar with what they need to do when they come to court. So that's that's something that's very real for us right now. When the economy is the way that it is right now, the cases that we see a lot of are child support cases. People can't pay their child support, so they want to come in and modify those. And all of those cases are heard by a child support magistrate. And those calendars have just gone through the ceiling because people they can't afford to do what they need to do.
And what people, I think, don't understand is that if that man stops paying, usually a man, child support, and a warrant is issued, he then gets picked up on the warrant. We then have another court proceeding, in addition to which the wife, the child, is not getting the money that they need. They may have to go on public assistance. Public assistance is drying up. So what it does, it's just like a circle that just keeps getting larger and larger and larger.
That's so true, and we keep scheduling these court appearances during the day and pulling them out of work possibilities or interview possibilities, so they're not getting the job. But the hammer's got to be there in order to compel compliance with these orders. So we're always trying to balance. The ultimate goal is to have these people working and paying child support, but you can't get blood out of a turnip. And we don't want to keep loading up our court calendars and sending the sheriffs off looking for these people with warrants. And
Who are also overworked.
right.
And what about the law schools? Can you get any help from the law schools in terms of maybe last year law students to help with some of the research or some of the other possibilities? And is that happening?
The public defenders and the prosecutors are getting a lot of support and help from the law schools, and it's a great educational tool for the students and for the schools to have what we call certified student attorneys coming in the courts and practicing and representing the city and in the prosecution and representing the defendant on misdemeanor charges and those kinds of things. So they've I think. A lot of the cities and certainly our county attorney and the public defender's office have expanded the use of that resource.
Let's talk about the public defenders. I read that there are as many as 57 cases on a public defender's calendar at any one time. How can an individual devote himself or herself to those cases? There has to be discovery. There has to be certainly motions. They may need forensic help, things like that. And if you have a serious criminal case, and you have serious criminal cases there, how can that public defender do their job? It's not the way it's portrayed in the movies. It's not the way John Grisham portrays it in his very interesting books. It's real life. How do they cope with that?
Well, first of all, I think we have a very good public defender system. The lawyers are professional, they're experienced. I often tell people that the best criminal attorneys in the state are probably public defenders. However, they're overworked. They have caseloads that I think are twice the ABA, American Bar Association standards. What they have done to survive is triage. They will very quickly assess a case, determine whether this is the type of case that's going to go to trial or not, and then they will, after making that determination, talk to the client, probably meet him for the first time at the first court appearance, tell them what they have looked at, try to develop a reasonable negotiation of the charge. And they do a good job. The difficulty, I think, is that they are doing it so often that they are very stressed now. They feel that they are not able to provide the level and quality of service that would allow this person to get effective assistance of counsel. And that's one of the standards that they use in appeal, as you know, that if the person doesn't have an effective counsel, they can overturn any sort of verdict that may have been rendered against them. So they're very concerned about their ability to provide that level of representation to the clients. But they do a wonderful job of sorting out these cases. In the serious cases, sometimes they'll even have two attorneys there to help in those cases. But the run-of-the-mill case, the case that the theft, the first drug possession case, those types of things are handled very quickly, very efficiently. But I think the problem with that is that the person who's involved in that probably gets good representation, probably gets a fair deal, but it happens so quickly, they're never sure. And the public defender that has to do that so quickly doesn't feel good about it.
And with just cause, really, because they have the conscience of the defendant to worry about. The other side of the coin is legal aid. Just as serious, people in civil matters who need help from legal aid, not just support cases, but other cases, a wide gamut of cases. And I know legal aid is overburdened, overworked, under budget, and short attorneys. So do we have the same situation there?
I think we do, and legal aid funding is quite a bit of federal funding, but also the interest that's earned on lawyers' trust accounts, and we all know what's happened to the interest rates, and so their revenues are way down. But what people don't understand is when civil legal aid represents somebody in a very difficult divorce case or a custody case or a housing situation or discrimination situation, they're really assisting the courts, because if not for legal aid and that representation, those people would be before us on a pro se basis and trying to represent themselves. And it takes an inordinate amount of time for the courts then to deal with, to help. Well, we're not supposed to help or assist, but for them to navigate through the court system without having the background and training of a lawyer. So to have legal aid, the best thing we can see when a case comes in our court is that both sides are represented by attorneys. We know we have a chance of getting the case resolved, getting it settled, and moving on to the next case.
And not getting overwhelmed with emotion, which is certainly one of the big things, particularly with somebody who is pro se, is representing themselves. Obviously, they don't have the legal training, and they also have within them whatever the genesis of this problem is.
And so we're flooded with a lot of irrelevant emotion that the conflict between the parties that is not very relevant to the decisions that we have to make in granting custody or determining a housing issue. So,
I mean, it's great in motion pictures where somebody's up there and then somebody in the back of the courtroom, you're a liar, I'm not a liar, etc. But this is real life we're talking about.
Right, it sells newspapers and maybe
not too many these days.
Motion pictures, but it doesn't help us decide the case.
Next week we're going to have a forum here on is print press dying, because we see what's happened to newspapers also. And we'll have a couple of the editors from the Pioneer Press and somebody from an online access, because it looks like that's where we're going, is online, which is not as reliable in my eyes as having that paper in my hands. But Carolyn, what are you doing to increase efficiency and to instill innovation within what you have to work with?
You know, what we're doing, we are doing an awful lot of cross-training. One of the things that we are now doing in the courtroom, which not all judges are happy about, but it really does make a difference for my staff, is we update our files while we're in the courtroom. We now do sentencing orders so that the judges don't have to write them out. We actually print them out in the courtroom. The judge then signs them and they're distributed in the courtroom. What this does for my staff, although it can make it a little more difficult in the courtroom, when they come back to the office after they've been in court all day, their job is done for the day. Their files are taken care of, so they don't come back to the office and have to do a pile of worry about the files.
But that's a big thing.
It's a big thing. That was one of the changes that Judge Lynch and Judge Knutson were talking about.
But their job isn't done for the day. It's just that morning calendar work is done.
Yes. They have other things that they have to do, obviously. I mean, but we do a lot of...
All those files are completed and can be refiled
for
at that point?
For that court calendar, they're done. They can just go back to the office, unless something has to be mailed out. If there are notices that need to be mailed out, those types of things have to be done in the office. But
and of course, when we talk about files, we talk about files like this, basically.
That's correct.
We haven't gotten to the point where everything is online.
Well, interesting that you mentioned that. Dakota County is piloting. Yeah, Dakota County is piloting a project right now where we are imaging all of our documents that come in. We put them into our case management system, which is called MinSys, and that allows us to be able to look at each image document at any time. We don't have to have the hard copy of the file. The judges are also able to look at the documents And the good thing about that is,
That's assuming your judges are user-friendly. For instance, if it was me, you'd be
That's-
in big trouble.
well, and we're about 50-50 as far as that goes. I was surprised to find out how many judges are actually using, looking at the documents and enjoy doing it that way, as opposed to having the court